I'm going to share a little presentation on my leadership journey and how it has largely been based around a journey that was all about the energy transition, mobility, and innovation. So just want to double confirm from someone on the tech team that we're good to go, and I can just crank into sharing a story. So I'm going to do a little share screen here, and yeah, I think, let me just double check that we're all, yeah, I'm just going to crack into it. Excellent. So I'm just going to show some photos so we can all relax. And it really starts with a story of going to the bottom of our planet, the South Pole, an area of our world that is often not forgotten about, but overlooked in its importance. Antarctica is a hugely significant place. 90% of our world ice is locked within Antarctica, and 70% of our world's fresh water is within that ice. So a hugely powerful place, and all of these purple areas you can see around are faster flowing ice flows. To put it into perspective, that top left section there is the size of Texas. 14 million square kilometers is the total size of Antarctica, and when you bring that down to Singapore, which is 750 square kilometers, that's 13,600 times the size of Singapore alone. So a hugely significant area, and really just wanted to walk the talk in bringing attention to big issues like mobility and transport, the energy transition, and indeed CO2, which seems like it is the elephant in the room, holding together a lot of the conversations when it comes to sustainable development, the Paris Agreement, you know, nationally determined contributions, net zero commitments. And CO2 is a gas that is a part of our healthy planetary system, but we, since the Industrial Revolution, have been putting in an insane amount of this stuff, around 180 million tons per day annually, each and every day annually. And Australia is number 15 biggest emitters and number 11 in regards to our per capita contribution, which is about 17, 18 tons per capita. And it's a global thing. It doesn't matter if you are living off grid and just, very connected, not using fossil fuels or plastic. We are all a part of using CO2 and being a part of the realities of our carbon dioxide that is in our atmosphere right now, which is about 418 parts per million. And to put that into perspective, ice core samples go back 1.5 million years, and they've never found pre-300 years our levels to go over 300 or so parts per million. So we truly are living in uncharted terrain, and yet we are still a huge contributor in Australia, and by the, in the eyes of some, not leading enough on this front. And as you can see here, Brazil, for example, is a huge country, a huge emitter, and they produce about 420 million tons a year, and we're 418, and that's pretty insane considering the size of their country and their population. So it's a global problem, but we have an opportunity to be thinking global but acting local, and really wanted to walk the talk quite literally over 1,000 kilometers, proving that we could travel to the South Pole powered on renewable energy, a feat that had never been attempted before, for good reason. It's pretty darn hard to drag an extra 15 kilo setup on already a 90 kilo sled for 58 days. We were down there for 64, but we skied for 68 days, 1,000 kilometers. And this was a NASA designed solar ice melting system here that could melt in 8 hours 6 liters of water in as close to -40, and -40 is where Fahrenheit and Celsius meet. So if there is still an American tuning in from the Ray presentation, quite like that -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet. This was definitely a bit of a hard day. Got a bit of ice literally in my face there, and not easy going skiing 9 hours a day for 2 months over 1,000 kilometers. Definitely put into perspective. Sorry, I've got someone knocking. One second. I'm just on a live thing here. So, and so yeah, definitely that put into perspective the how our convenience in the real world really shouldn't be taken for granted, whether it's a comfy bed or running water or being able to switch on the light or charging our e-scooter or our electric vehicle, hopping on public transport, some of the amazing things that Dandenongshire do, which some people don't think are amazing, even though they keep the lights going, keep our roads clean, look after our drains. The councils around Australia do an amazing job making sure that we have those basic conveniences, and was definitely reminded of that in hard moments like this, and have to be careful. Ski in the wrong place, you fall down one of these crevasses. This patch of ice is 15 kilometers deep. The ice is actually so heavy, it's going below sea level. It's actually pushing weight on these huge domes down there. So fall down one of these holes, you're not coming back. That's not demonstration work. That's total fatigue after about a month of skiing with another month to go. And really sometimes felt like one of those monkeys with the cymbal doing a sort of dance of sales, in a sense. All of these sponsors made this expedition happen. And, after a month and a bit, it was just hard to keep that focus going and keep the momentum of showing up and doing my best. And definitely some beautiful moments down there between the suffering. These parhelion sundog formations around the sun were truly out of this world. Diane probably is going to have moments when she heads up to Mars of actually being on a different planet, but it definitely felt like it was on a whole different sort of planet on some days like this. Definitely some Star Trek sci-fi action, and the solar panels took a good beating in -40. And hopefully none of you have had lunch anytime soon, but did definitely get some pretty rough frostbite. I had frostbite on my face, my hands, my feet are still damaged. Almost lost my toe there. You can see, not super fun, but just showing that image just to prove it wasn't just a sort of film for a day and go check into the Brits afterwards. We really suffered out there and didn't have internet for two months and no shower for 2 months. And moments with skiing and you feel like this a sundial because the shadow is going around you and you're just skiing in this one direction, and definitely heard things that weren't there and saw faces and things in the shadows that weren't there. And definitely mentally was very challenging, and really reminded me, I had high-tech sleeping bags and a radio just in case we were dying, that we could be rescued. But the true explorers at the turn of the last century are heading off into the breach with no safety net, just each other. Definitely put things into perspective on those hard days. That was Christmas Day, as you can see Kyle's mug there. I skied with Kyle and Martin. Kyle's mug, hadn't been washed for a good month and a bit there. And, I try and don't eat meat, but definitely was eating some meat on Christmas and salami. I went in 82 kilos and came in 64. We could eat about 7,000 calories a day, but we were burning about 10. So definitely some hard going miles. And, that was our effort for Christmas around stinky socks and stinky men. And definitely appreciate celebration a little bit more and count those blessings. And a hugely poignant moment standing there, very proud, but also slightly anticlimactic. 2 months of skiing, 2 years of preparation, 25 sponsors. And then suddenly you're looking at this shiny ball and it's looking back at you and you're like, all right, what was the point of all that? But, what is the point in so many things that we do? And I think bringing it back to shared ecology and the energy transition and diversity inclusion and so many of these hot topics that link back to the Sustainable Development Goals, if we can really show up each and every day as best we can with that kind of element of service for the planet and culture and each other and our family and our friends, I think it is an honourable way to live about life. And just to reinforce the utter pointlessness of skiing to the South Pole and renewable energy, it took us 2 months to ski there, and in 5 hours we hopped on a plane and went back to base camp and looking out the window and being like, all of those moments of suffering and frostbite. You know, what was the point in all of that? And getting back to the England, and then every single person's on their phone, you know, like attached to their head in the London Underground, only 5 days after being at the South Pole. You know, was a struggle. And then going to the World Economic Forum and speaking out there at Davos and feeling like all of these suited men were running around talking about how wonderful their next impact portfolio is, but not really being relevant to this sort of half insane frostbitten madman who's trying to do his best with slippers on because I couldn't fit my feet into normal shoes. And, you know, the people, billions out there who don't have energy and don't have water security and are living paycheck to paycheck if they're lucky to eat and live and move. You know, it didn't feel like this upper echelon of getting our act together felt relevant to those people. So, you know, bringing it back to Australia, again, there's a lot of frustration federally that we're not moving quick enough with certain agendas. But I think that, you know, that up current that we're seeing in young people, and I've spoken, you know, in 10 plus countries with schools, and you know, especially in places like Singapore, which is where this photo is taken, they really want hope. And there's a big problem with depression in Singapore right now. 1 in 4 youth are depressed, and suicide rates are spiking. And, you know, how do you instill a sense of place where you don't have that much space to recreate, and there's hyper competitive performance aspects within the academic institutions? And, you know, I think it's really important to remember how lucky we are with our natural assets out here in Australia. And for all those who aren't living in Australia and tuning in, just to encourage more greening of space and more protection of biodiversity, because those things do connect people directly to ecology. And this I did feel hopeful about. You know, I'm sitting in my office here in Far North Queensland, and I've got the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of the goals out front in the public. I often see people looking and just seeing what they are. They're colourful, they're engaging, and it doesn't matter what sector you're in, what industry you're in, everyone these goals are relevant to, because it really does holistically look at any community group, any school, any small business. Even if you're unemployed, these are still relevant for all of us getting our act together. And so I created a charity, DGR1, tax deductible Australian charity, which is no easy task. They're a bureaucratic bunch, the Australians at best, and took 1.5 years to set this up. But I wanted to have good standing and to be respectable in the eyes of institutions. And, you know, since we commenced the charity in 2017, we planted over 3,000 trees with Jane Goodall out in Tanzania after facilitating an expedition up to top of Kilimanjaro, you know, giving back more than we took. You know, sharing a VR film I've created with some locals, which was definitely surreal. The gentleman behind the guy watching the VR just put it on. He was like, this is the devil's work, you know, and I'm not sure about all of this, but being able to share VR with disabled people and people who might not have the option to see some of the places listed in that video has been very special. And working out the UAE has been poignant. You know, there's such an up current of really fired up ladies like Amira who are leading the way, disrupting some of the old school fossil fuel based mentalities in the UAE. And what's happening up in the Arctic is definitely a reminder to work hard. It's like the early warning signs of what Antarctica will be feeling. And indeed, Greenland, Iceland, the Himalayas, they're all catching up to what's already happening in the Arctic very quickly. And every year we go down to Antarctica, unfortunately not last year because of COVID, but we're going to be heading back next March to facilitate another leadership expedition down there. We plant double the amount of what's expected of us to be carbon neutral on these expeditions, because we acknowledge that they're not powered off, you know, hydrogen or electric vessels yet. So we make sure the whole expedition is net positive. And for anyone who doesn't know what net positive means, basically if you're net neutral, let's say you use 100 tons a year to manage your business to be carbon neutral, you would sequester, draw down 100 tons. But if you did 110 tons, that means you give back more than you take from an emission standpoint. So all of our expeditions are net positive. And really just encourage that collective, that community, the co-elevation space of industries and sectors coming together to just like Forever Fest, really talk about this and share and ask lots of questions. And I love seeing someone from a big corporate next to a student, next to an artist, all having a kind of cross-sharing experience. It's very powerful. And, data centers, it's a really big one. Some often forget about data-related services in 2019 were 4.8% of global emissions. By 2040, they'll be close to 14%, which will out-succeed aviation. So one phone, using a phone for an hour, 365 days a year is 1.5 tons of CO2. And so if you've got 2 phones and a laptop, your yearly output from an emission standpoint is close to sub-Saharan African at 4.23 tons on average. So don't underestimate these. We need to source them off clean, renewable energy ASAP. And a water project I thought would be worth mentioning, hydro-solar projects. Basically, water is going to be an increasingly big deal in Australia. We're quite drought, vulnerable, and these not sequestered, draw out 800 liters of water if you had these plugging two batteries, but you also had without input a bore or things like reverse osmosis. Amazing. You can also CO2 directly, which is definitely an important part of reaching net zero fuel. And obviously, like using net carbon sinks are really important. This technology vents such a 50 tons to 1 trillion liters to get on. I get thousands of questions and all of those per annum. Pretty drawing down in cities and high pollution. We can actually capture that CO2, make assets out of it, like ethylene, ethanol-based products, brick and mortar clothing, sunglasses, and potentially even silica substitute technology, which is pretty exciting. Continuing to engage online and really enjoy what's engaged in Hong Kong. Looking for places where they can share and learn. So really, and sustainability is like, yeah, man, let's just go hug some trees. This is $1 trillion industry, and either on it or you're not. Within these next years, the pendulum is to more green, more focus, and it's important stakeholders, your shareholders, investors, everyone in between. And really just shifting that culture. And that's the sign outside the front of the office there, doing my part. This is this table right now, playing timber from my friend. This is the office space 100 years ago. And just doing my part to convert an image like this in the kind of, like when Coca-Cola, I need to know that it's opportunity along the here, and there's a big rubbish between with Parlay and 350 tons of bridge. So a group of people, and obviously safely and with the hand sanitizer, the picking up sticks is always good, but it's our shared responsibility to look after our environment, not just the trash man and the trash woman's job by any means. And definitely inspiring young people to do it. That's one of my my friend's daughter, who always is cleaning up rubbish when we're having it, and make such a positive festival as a part of recently. And look at face, and how do you convert that moment into more oriented places? It seems that the anti-vax and the vaccines are places, and so we need to be thinkers, but we also need to lean on science and really a bit more trust in institutions. Be doing this, just to act. I think includes good middle ground. They all middle ground really need to be going to that. That leads me to the final green trick for the over to me, and that's right here as a not illustrated at my trade, and this is right. To purchase 400 Christian it was all done, and now I'm actually really purchased 400 and up the tree. Actually around and really excited to back to regular doing exactly this with the stuff, and now which the Martha the team some true more this is and really excited that we are doing more. We can your municipality plants 6 trees from a video a couple of days, and this 900 will be a contributing factor up here in the world's oldest range between the wet tropic management area and the G2 very significant heritage areas. And very sweet seeing children in space learning about plant. And I remember when she did her first thing, she sort of ripped it apart and be like, no, you got to be soft with the roots, and being able to teach a young mind of only 2 how to be soft with plants is a beautiful thing. Really enjoying having a lot of friends and employees and just a community growing around what we're building out here, which is fun. And mobility, we're going to be doing electric vehicle charging stations, encouraging recreation on this property through hiking and bird watching, and really wanting to show people what regeneration looks like instead of just locking off the gate and never allowing anyone back in. I think we need to embed the story of some of this stuff and really humanize things like ESG and sustainable development goals and corporate social responsibility. We need those human stories that both companies can connect with and travelers and citizens alike. So working with some pretty leading botanists to identify seeds and really understand what's endemic, what's not, and leaders from the Tropical Herbarium, the Canberra Sydney Botanic Gardens, and hopefully connect one day with the Melbourne Botanic Gardens, which would be awesome. We don't have any connections there yet, but learning from the best. And there's unfortunately cattle on the property right now, and cattle obviously create turbidity, create mud, ruin land, wetness, and the property in the water cleared, and that goes to the river reef, which we don't need any struggling enough bleaching. So indirectly, directly affecting not forest, indeed the Great Barrier Reef. There is hope for the bleaching outside of getting our act together between land and sea practices. We can actually be up to 5 degrees. Coral system is bleached, so it never grow back. But if you have these nodes that remain intact, you don't get the algae that basically smothers everything and kills it, which again links back to nitrogen often, which is a big thing in the Murray-Darling Basin and other freshwater sources around the world. Too much nitrogen, too much cattle, too much fertilizer. This creates these nitrogen blooms. Nothing can survive because there's too much oxygen. And just like CO2, oxygen, CO2, they're important parts of things, but too much of anything can often lead to trouble. And again, electric vehicles, I love them. Emma was awesome. She taught us so much about converting, especially classic cars into one off-grid charge properly and to achieve the local main. I totally can't need for the egg moment. Got to have it for the cars can come or order the cars and then charge it. But doing my best education on that. And I just one before I'll speak front 25 capping plants, 6 pawpaw, basil, thyme, chive, the young. I think it's important as young people, especially to be learning from the old ladies and gentlemen who've been surviving on this planet longer than we've been alive, and hearing their knowledge, talking with them, asking lots of questions. They have so much to share, and I think it's important that we really have, again, that cross collaboration and just pollinating each other's ideas, because young people can be innovative, but older folk often have that best practice understanding and really understand how to implement. So both of those things marrying together, all round happy face. And definitely working with young people and Jabba been on Aboriginal Corporation on a formal partnership with them, working really the seeds of certain medicine plants and we're trying to propagate those because often they were hardwood and obviously made good timber. So really trying to reconnect to that. And some technologies, understanding the whole web of lots of 90% of the 400 acres was cleared, 2 these that's to provide that they don't get scientists to lead the way, because really all of the same that trust from the public to be scaled, protecting biodiversity, and really seeing value of looking after these natural assets more and more. I think that's about it. I can't see any more questions, so I think we can finish off a little earlier today. And thank you everyone who was tuning in and just giving a little bit of listen to what I had to share today. And looking forward to continuing to MC